So again, welcome everybody. Um, so Jeffrey, moments ago, you were just talking about the increase in energy, the increase in force as a unused signal of the evolutionary impulse of creation itself. And it raises in me the question, right? Because we've talked about this in the past, that there is an aspect to the planetary requirement for human life on it. And I have added up that it is an artificial need, not artificial from the standpoint of invented, but artificial from the standpoint of where she was at in her progress as a being, in her own development. And we toss around these ideas, at least we have in the past, that there's an aspect to the planet that prevents too many of us, that prevents our evolution, right? That has this kind of haze, this sort of fog, or this gravitational or even magnetic pull, right? That prevents this kind of awakening. And yet, I no longer think that's the case. I think that was required quite a long time ago. But I think that she has since evolved to the point where, unless there's actual uptake in humanity, then we are a cause of drain for her, instead of it being the other way around. In other words, the pull shifted, and unless humanity is able to step up to its functional role in creation, we're actually holding the planet back instead of vice versa. What do you think of that?
I think in some aspects that's the case. And I think in others, something we've discussed at a previous meeting is kind of taking the place of, say, animal life, or right, to fill in. I think I always think of it as example of the buffalo, and to fill in at a lower order, because we're capable of doing it. It's not the ideal, but we're capable of it.
Yeah, it reminds me of the story of the airplane crashing in the Amazon. And this tribe encounters it, who has never seen anything like an airplane before.
Mm-hmm.
And so they begin to investigate it, right? Because it's something unusual. And they realize that it's hollow on the inside. And some bright individual among them decides that that being the case, and since it's watertight, they can store their food in there. And so they store, various grains and produce and that sort of thing, to protect it from the elements, to protect it from exposure. That's not what an airplane was designed to do, right? And then several years go by. Someone in the tribe realizes that it's got wheels, and that if you attach it to a couple dozen animals, you can actually pull it around the village and store things in it in different places, or bring it with you when you travel, right? But it's still not what an airplane was designed to do. Then someone even more inventive, more brighter, comes along and realizes that if you press the certain buttons in the right order in the front of it, that it actually can move on its own. And so they detach the animals, and now they're able to drive this thing around town, right? It runs on its own power, but it's still not what an airplane was designed to do, is it? Yeah. And of course, this can go on and on and on. And hypothetically, someone discovers that with the right kind of maintenance and the right kind of repairs, that this thing can fly, right? The full expression of what this airplane was designed to do. And I'm of the opinion, actually, that we are very much, most of humans are very much like a crashed airplane. needs some repairs, generally being used, especially in the case of Americans, to store food. Yeah, but no, being used in a way that isn't according to our design, and with the right kind of tweaks, the right kind of repairs, um, and the right kind of driving intelligence behind it, that we're capable of flight too. We're capable of doing more than what we currently do with ourselves. I'm waiting for your next bit. By the way, I'm changing pace just a little bit for today. Okay, I'm likely not going to give new exercises. And the reason for that is that we all need to be, if you think of it this way, if you think of it that we are 9 companions walking along a road together, and you know, this is a journey, and if for some reason one or another member of this kind of expeditionary party needs to either take a break, or needs to rest for a while, or needs to stop more often. If you think about it in normal terms, right, you wouldn't just leave someone behind, would we?
Mhm.
We would. I mean, we're in this together. So today is we've decided to camp for a moment. Yeah. And we've decided to tell campfire stories and ask questions, and just really do what comes up. All right, is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Good. So, did you have a follow on to that, Jeffrey, or did we hit
No,
that topic?
I think we hit it. We're
Okay, good. So let me open it up then to folks. We'll start in the specific and go towards the general. In the past few weeks, I've given various different kinds of exercises, hopefully not an overwhelming amount, hopefully just the right amount to where you can pick up the things that are useful and maybe shelve the things that aren't yet useful in this. But I would like to get some feedback, and let me take a pulse on everyone to find out how it's been going, and how you found the exercises, whether they've been valuable, where you may have gotten stuck. Yeah. So anyone, feel free to chime in, and then we will broaden it out into something a bit more general. How's it going? I guess that's the question.
I'm making breakfast, so if I can go last, that'll be good.
All right.
I don't mind going first.
Yeah, sure.
I found the stopping and starting bit really difficult. It was almost like my whole life is lots of stops and starts.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was really hard.
Yeah.
But I've been doing the balancing and the eye exercises, and I do feel it's doing something, but I'm not too sure what.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel stronger in myself.
Great. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, right? I mean, there comes a point in usually in the beginning stages of one's development journey, where you kind of just have to laugh at yourself, because you didn't realize that you were going on this way, right, through your whole life. Whether you tend to babble about things, whether you tend to sudden starts and stops, or you tend towards clumsiness or lack of observation about your environment, or like all of these things. And I'll tell you what, none of us are alone in that. What is unique and rare is that most people sort of just bump and bumble their way through life without ever noticing this about themselves. So the fact, I see some laughter, right? But the fact that we are in a position now where we're noticing these things about ourselves is actually quite extraordinary.
Mm.
Yeah. Most people never really get this opportunity to do so. So great. Yeah. Just don't forget to kind of, when you find yourself being, clumsy or sudden starts or stops or any number of things that you've decided to work on, step back and just smile about it. It's okay. Yeah. It's the nature of it right now. So good. Yeah. Who else wants to go? How's it been? Clarity, have you noticed your ability to observe continue to improve? I know last week you had mentioned, what was it? Was it whether you had turned the stove off or something like that, wasn't it?
It was a front door.
Front door, yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So I'm still okay with that. I've watched myself do things now.
Yeah.
I think Mark disagrees with me.
What Mum means is that she watches some things, but things still go wrong, such as
Sure.
I won't go on.
Frankie, I'll check Daniel's stuff.
Well, I'll give one example though. Mum has a tendency to kill glasses when doing washing up because what often happens is that she'll bash the glass on the tap.
Yeah.
And we've had, I don't know, maybe a month or so without any glasses that have bitten the dust until, what was it, last Friday? Something like Friday. Jack Daniel's glass bought it. Just a little chip taken out, but yeah. What wasn't usable because it's sharp edge and all that. Oh well,
Right.
poor glass. Yeah, so mum notices what she does, but I'd still say that she's very clumsy.
Well, so right. Remember from last time, I drew this kind of thing, right? Do you remember this? Where all life works in cycles, doesn't it? But this is the trend that we're looking for, this kind of upward trend. You're still going to see these peaks and troughs throughout. But for most people, their life follows this kind of line, doesn't it? Where they just vacillate between one thing and another, which becomes very habitual, doesn't it? So yeah, good. And I do get the sense in what you're saying is that there is improvement, that it's trending in the right direction. And that's all we can do. It's what we're looking for in this.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah, wonderful. Did you know that life worked like this? Should be told that in school, huh?
Yeah.
Up and down.
I kind of knew it because it's been mentioned multiple times in pain management that you've got to try and push yourself, but not to the point where your body just goes, nah, you aren't taking the hint, and you then have a really bad few days of pain, and it kind of goes into a boom and bust kind of thing, and it averages out more of a downward line than an upward line. So
Yeah, right.
yeah. So I kind of knew, but it was more of a specific application of that idea.
What did you draw anything from the story of the ninja training about the do you recall jumping over the corn stalks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I did think of something at the time. I'm just trying to remember it.
So let me share the point that I find most striking about that. It's not even so much in the aspect of what a human is ultimately able to do when they're well trained, but it's more along the lines of the process by which it actually can happen, by which it actually can take. And we don't tends to follow this process in our culture these days. And namely, that is having the humility to start over when you reach your plateau. Right? I mean, imagine how frustrating this poor ninja in training. Imagine how frustrated that must seem, right? You get up to a 6 foot tall corn stalk, and your big toe hits it for the first time on the way over, right? And instead of going to a 5 foot tall corn stalk and starting from there, you go, bless you.
Yes, you.
You go all the way. Sorry, hold on. I think you, are you unmuted, Pleiades?
Did I see so for everyone?
Yeah, yeah, it's fine. Yep, you're muted now, I think. Imagine the frustration of having to plant a seed and start over. I find that to be incredible. That's actually what it takes to do something, to be able to get to those higher and higher and higher levels. What do you think of that, Sam? First of all, do you think that's even the case? That is what's required?
It's an interesting idea, and I think that I think that it would be a more effective way of training rather than going from, say, the 6 foot high stalk to the 5 foot high stalk, but going right back to the beginning and then kind of working your way back up again.
Do you know why it works, why it's more effective to do it that way than to just chop it down to 5 feet and let it grow again?
I'm not sure why. It just seems to, in my head, it just seems maybe it would be a good idea. I'm not quite sure why.
It has to do with a force within each of us that accumulates, and the common word for that is called anticipation. When force begins to pool and accumulate, it feels like anticipation of something. Okay, and we all know it from the standpoint of you're excited about some sort of event coming up. Yeah, you're as a kid, the one that pops into my mind is just being thrilled that I was going to go to this amusement park. Yeah, and the more you think about something, the larger this bank of force gets in your aura, right? The more energy you pump into it. Now, in the idea with the corn, with the jumping over the corn, had it only gone back to 5 feet, where the young ninja in training, if you will, knew that he or she could do the 5 foot jump, that would not have developed much anticipation in that. It wouldn't have allowed that anticipation to begin to build. In fact, quite the opposite. What it would have done was allow the anticipation of failure to build, because it wasn't enough of a start over. You see, if you start at 5 feet and within 6 days it grows to 6 feet again, then the way that the mind is wired and the way that the mentality and the systems are wired, it's only going to anticipate failure in 6 days when it's back to 6 feet again. But by starting over, you develop this much, much larger pool of force in you that will, by the time you get to that 6 foot mark, will be so great that you'll be able to expend it in one leap. Yeah, and that will add that kind of force, add that kind of power to that intention that you set. So
yeah,
there's quite a bit of wisdom in it, really, from my standpoint. One moment, please.
I have a thought there, if I may.
Yeah, please.
You know, this is when we learn something for the first time, we don't have a habit yet, or we don't have the nuance involved in whatever it is that we are learning. So by its very nature, we miss a lot. But when we have done it several times, when we have done 4 or 5 times, we have gone several levels. And if we go back to the beginning, we already know enough about it. We know quite a bit about it. And we're going to go learn the concepts and learn the theory behind the concepts, perhaps the principles behind the concepts of what we are learning. And so our learning is that much more powerful going back. It's like the way I sort of equate it is, I equate it to my poker game. If you're trying to go higher in limits and you go bust your bankroll, then you don't go back to a lower level. You go back to the beginning. You go to the 2-4 limit game, not to the 1-5 no limit game. Yeah. Because you have to go build, something's going on there. You have to go build principles. You got to get the values again. And when you do that, if you do that effectively, if you do that as an exercise of, I need to go back here because there's something there that I missed. If you do it that way, as opposed to, oh, what is this crap? I'm just going to get through this very quickly without really paying attention. Right. If you do it correctly, if you do it the same enthusiasm that you did the first time around, then you're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn more, perhaps, than what you learned the first time.
I'm going to caveat your poker example from the standpoint of, if you keep trying to play the high limit, or I should say the high buy-in, no limit games, and you have a fundamental error, you're going to get to the point where you're not even able to start over because you'll lose all of your money.
Yeah.
So there's a certain wisdom in being able to look at yourself and look at your progress and look at where your toe is tipping the branch, honestly, isn't it? And to be able to go back to the beginning before you've expended your ability to do so in general. I imagine the process, you've mentioned in the past that you're a chess grandmaster, and I imagine you didn't get there by linear progression, right? You might have started with particular opening, Spanish opening or whatever, and perfected that. But then once that theory ran dry, once that theory began to run out, you can't stick with the Spanish opening, right? In this particular example, you have to go back and you have to learn another opening and another game strategy, right? We're just talking about the opening or beginning game, to get to different variations in the middle and end game. Isn't that the case? It's not a linear progression, but you hold your knowledge with you. You bring something with you from the experience. Would you agree, Sachin?
Oh, I thought you were talking to Sam. I'm not a chess grandmaster.
I thought you said you were. Who's a chess grandmaster here?
I'm not.
Did I miss something?
I learned chess in school, but I didn't get very far.
Congratulations! Now you are. It's official. It's recorded.
But not chess. Chess has less permutations and is less complicated game than poker.
True. Yeah, it's perfect knowledge versus imperfect, right? In game theory. Yeah. Right. Okay. So now we have gone specific. Does anyone else want to chime in on just how the exercises are going, or have questions specific to what we've been working through for the past couple of weeks?
So someone else want to go?
No, please jump in.
Okay. So I noticed a significant difference between the eye movement exercises and the observations, which I was able to remember at points during the day, right? And then I just stop and do it.
Yeah.
Different than the movement, which was incredibly difficult, near impossible.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
So in other words, so instead of the jarring movements, the smoother circular movements, is that when I would remember in those moments, they're quick moments and then they're gone, because the moving center is almost entirely in control.
It is the tyrant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just can't hold that, because you just get on, I get up from a chair the way I get up from a chair. And
Yeah.
it's just so hard. I can remember it in one movement and then, then I'm back to the races, whatever I'm doing.
This is why the recommendation therein is to change or work on one thing at a time. And generally speaking, the best way into that is just to work on one speed. And the reason why this works is because the moving center, listen, if you decide to go for a walk today, on a sidewalk, in the park, whatever the case may be, you're going to have a certain rhythm that is distinctly you, distinctly your natural walking rhythm. If you do it again 2 years from now, you will still walk in the same rhythm, right? Because this is a moving center thing. It's a moving center function. The other centers, well, specifically the thinking center, can't keep up with the moving center. And this does tie into something that I may bring up today, or if not, then during the next one. But by intentionally slowing yourself down, you unplug the moving center from the activity. And it's incredibly valuable. And, you can think of it in these terms. If you're in a Ferrari Enzo and driving down the street in your local neighborhood at 130 miles an hour, God forbid, you're not going to see very much, are you, of your neighborhood. If you then drive the speed limit, say it's 35, you'll see more, right? But you're not going to see as much as if you were perhaps on a bicycle or walking or Tai Chi walking, right? Slow walking type of thing. You're going to see, observe, and sense so much more the more you slow down. Now, what this tells me is that this is the act of observation, or I should say the act of conscious observation, can really only begin in the thinking center. If the thinking center can find a pace where it can actually be involved in it. Fast just doesn't cut it. Now, there is a possibility once the higher mentality becomes activated and the higher emotional centers become activated, they're very curious from the standpoint that they can accommodate any speed. Did you know this? They can accommodate the speed of any center by matching its level. And it has to do with how they begin to perceive things like time, for example. But the centers, they are the speed they are. And so observation is just not possible beyond a certain speed. Don't get me wrong. For example, the moving center can actually observe itself in isolation, but it cannot convey that knowledge to the other centers because it speaks Chinese and the emotional center, for example, speaks Russian. Yeah. So each center can look at itself, but it can't convey that info very well. That's why you get so many wacky dreams sometimes. It's one center chattering about its experiences to another center. Yeah. So yeah, the starting place for this that makes it all possible is first just to slow down, if you're able to do that. And it's funny, people won't notice. You might think people will notice, but they don't. And in any event, who cares if they do? At best, what most people who are not highly conscious, at best, what they will perceive is that there's something unusual about you, but it will also be attractive. Give you an example. Who here has seen the television show Breaking Bad? It's not like esoteric, right? You've seen the show. There is the main boss in there named Gus. Now, if you watch his mannerisms and his demeanors, you will see that they are very deliberate, very slow, and very intentional. And yet, if you don't have the wherewithal to understand why that character was made to perform in that way, in other words, act in that way, then you would just kind of have this sense that he is powerful, that he is articulate, that he is in control. And you would be right from the standpoint of that act, but you would never think it to be incredibly contrived. You might border on that because he does go a bit extreme in this, but I guarantee you, if you cut your speed in half, no one's going to notice. And in fact, people will be more drawn to you because of it, because you're cooler, you run cooler. So, does that offer any additional value for you, Jeffrey?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, start there. And it's difficult to be clumsy. It's difficult to break glasses. It's difficult to do any of these things that we look at ourselves and just shake our heads about when you've cut the speed in half, isn't it? I mean, clarity in the example of breaking a glass, it's almost impossible, because if you're going this pace to bring the glass up, you won't have enough kinetic energy to break the glass in there. So serve some other purposes. You understand, I'm taking a humorous route with this, okay?
Yeah.
Brushing your teeth does need to be done at a certain moving center pace, by the way, right? Because if you're doing this, first of all, you'll never finish. Okay. And second of all, you won't have enough energy in there to get done what you need done. Yeah. So be wise about it. That's the point. I'm not saying don't brush your teeth this way. What I'm saying is use your inner wisdom of when it's necessary and when it's not. Yeah. If you have a stick shift in your automobile, don't shift slowly. Okay, do what's required. This kind of work needs to be done with intelligence also. But to Jeffrey's point, it is difficult to remember, isn't it? If you've actually applied yourself to this, it's very, very difficult to remember. You'll find this, and it's another observation that, generally speaking, all of you excluded, because I'm getting to know you very well. If someone new came to this work and said, piece of cake, I've got it, next bit, please. I'd probably boot them out because they're lacking honesty, or they're lacking the integrity to actually do it. Yeah. So this is work, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. All right, let's go a bit more general now. Who has a question? It can regard anything. And if I can answer it, I will. If I can't, I won't.
Yes, I think you answered it, but I just want to make it a little bit more explicit. And this is kind of goes into what I've been feeling a little bit too, right? I've been spread too thin, trying too many things, in our current culture, and also with personal development. One of the things that I've been focused on is trying to get my house and landscaping done myself, because I'm cheap and I don't want to pay somebody $3,000 to get it done. And plus, I think it's good exercise anyway. Like I like working in the garden. And so the example I want to come up with is, I spent a good 2 or 3 months, maybe 60 hours, 50 hours, something like that, killing brambles.
Doing what?
Brambles, Himalayan blackberries, nasty weed, very nasty weed.
Got it.
And then I finally gave up and I hired somebody to do it. And then I finally figured out that if I had used the pick, there's this thing called a pick.
Yeah.
Then I would have gone much faster.
Yeah.
I bought the pick and I started digging, and now I find that my hands are sore, everything is really sore. Kind of long way into going. The pick needs very sharp, heavy movements, because I have to go dig deep and pull it out. If from last time, it feels like that is a wasteful movement, right? Because I'm doing sharp certain moves where I'm lifting it, and it feels wasteful from what, but I don't see any other way of doing it any more effectively, because I'm trying to get to the bramble that sometimes go 2 feet in the soil.
What was the general rule there? Anything you do unconsciously is
Oh.
energy lost. Okay. Anything you do consciously, you can maintain it. I can be up here jittering and bouncing around. Okay. Normally that would be just spraying my vitality everywhere. But if I can maintain a consciousness about it while I'm doing it, it doesn't. We'll get into the mechanics of why that happens. But, you know, again, Sachin, it's, if that's what's required of the movement, then use all the training that you've had in other areas of this work, and apply the consciousness aspect to it. Okay. And I'll tell you this, you'll know that it's working when you are only using the muscles and skeletal structure that's necessary to perform the task. In other words, if you've got that pickaxe or whatever it is, and you're, you know, every muscle in your body is kind of going into it and everything is clumsy and everything is tense, if it's not a fluid movement each time, right? You've seen these like people that chop wood. Yeah, it's effortless for them to chop wood. It's absolutely, it's just like boom, right? They're only using exactly what's required. In the Tao Te Ching, there is the story, Tao Te Ching, is that right? Yeah, in the Tao Te Ching, if you care to look it up, you will come across the story of the Butcher Yue. And it's worth a read because it does relate to this from the standpoint of this butcher had so much skill, so much consciousness in what he did, that he would be able to every cut slice right through the joints of what it was that he was butchering at the time. And it was completely effortless. Whereas his young apprentice is hacking away, hitting bone every time, you know, doing it too hard. I said before that it takes no more time, in fact, usually it takes less time to do something the right way or correctly than it does to do it the wrong way. So don't worry about doing what you need to do, but find ways to do it better and find ways to do it consciously. I know what you're like. You probably do things like this anyway. If you're used to, you know, holding it a certain way, you're probably out there doing it a different way with your left hand, or, you know, standing in a different way.
How did you know that? I'm going in there and saying, okay, I'm going to try it this way. Next time I'm going to try it this way. I'm going to use my left hand up once, then I'm going to use my right hand up once, then I'm going to twist it around. I've tried all the combinations and I've kind of figured out 3 or 4 that are effective.
I know. Good for you. Yeah.
It's still hard work though. That's what I'm complaining about. It's just like sore muscles. But
yeah, for sure. And that's going to happen. Yeah. So does that help?
Yeah, it helps. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. The only advice in doing things smooth, less angular, without sudden starts and stops is these are all counter habitual to the moving center. Yeah. What does the moving center like to do most? We will talk about the appetites since it was part of the, what does the moving center enjoy the most?
Repetition.
Yeah. It's right up there. You're right.
In philosophy, I think moving center wants to do the least amount of actual moving to achieve its goals.
That is actually the opposite of what the moving center does. That's a disruption in the thinking center that does that. We'll go into that in a moment. But the moving center, in essence, loves to move. And the more movement it can do, the more it feels like it's doing its job. You see, the more, trust me, Sachin, even though you're sore, your body, I should say, the moving center loves every minute of it that you're doing it. It's other centers that are interfering with it and saying, this hurts, stop doing this, right? In this case, it's your instinctive center that says, you're overdoing it, their moving center, time to put the brakes on a little bit, that sort of thing. Yeah, but the moving center, if just left to its own accord, would eat itself stupid and move constantly. Right? If it was just one being all by itself, it would just be this hungry, ravishing, constantly moving fire. Yeah, constantly devouring. Let's touch on what I've been intending to touch on a little bit over the past couple of episodes of this. And it has to do with the appetites, both in a balanced way and in an imbalanced way amongst the various centers. The thinking center, its chief flaw when it's not functioning the way that it was designed, is to look for shortcuts in absolutely everything. It becomes lazy, and we all see this. We all see this from the standpoint of, you go to the grocery store, someone says, "How are you? Did you find everything okay?" And you say, "Oh, good, how are you? I found everything good." That is a shortcut in thinking. It really is. So part of this work that we are intending here in the future is to not let these centers get away with their bad behavior any longer. Shallow thinking is a shortcut. In fact, probably about 95% of all of the things that you believe, right, are shortcuts. And the reason for it is because of the world in which we live. If you think about how many billions of bits of information are coming into your brain every second, there is a certain particular survival value for it to develop shortcuts. Yeah, it needs to rely on certain things in order to be able to protect and preserve and move you forward in life. But that's a natural function, and that's okay. I'm not saying abdicate that. What I am saying is not to let it get away with something when it's not appropriate to do so. For example, if you go to the store and someone says, "How are you?" Well, likely they don't give a shit how you are anyway. But do you actually take the time to process in yourself whether or not you're going to genuinely respond? Because I know you generally do with me, don't you? I say, "How was your week?" and you actually think about it. Because your thinking center knows it would get in trouble if you're just like, "Yeah, pretty good. How was your week?" Would get in trouble with me, wouldn't it? We would have to back it up and start again. Do you understand the idea of shortcuts? Is this clear to everyone? That's what the thinking center tries to do. It tries to reduce everything down to a minimalistic formula. And when we are dealing with the occult and esoteric realms of things, it's just not going to cut it. Your life is not a shortcut. Your thoughts can't be shortcuts. If you take time, we'll talk about tension in another meeting, but there's a certain kind of tension, just like in the eye exercise, that you need to hold in your minds. You need to hold in your thoughts, in your brains, a prolonged attention. Attention is what it's called. But it's under the category of tension, right? Hardness, tension. Yeah, so thinking center, its demise is shortcuts. Moving, let's come back to moving center in a minute. Moving, instinctive center. Do you know what its demise is? It's greed. It's greedy. Because, see, the instinctive center, its job is to preserve you, to preserve your life, to make sure that you're functioning according to as close to the design as you can. Now, when it's unbalanced, what it starts to do is collect everything. And it sticks it in its back pocket and says, "Oh, that might be useful for later. That might be useful. Oh, that might be useful. Ooh, I might need that," right? And it ends up becoming bloated with anticipatory needs that are never actually met. Greed is a perversion of the instinctive center. Do you follow why that's the case? Because it's collecting stuff in the hopes that it will help you survive better or longer. I do need to point out that I'm not saying in this that you should all be paupers or only make exactly what you need to survive. It's okay in this society to thrive, but again, do it with consciousness, okay? If you are set on acquiring wealth, don't let it be senseless greed. Don't let it be from the foundation of senseless greed. Let it be from the foundation of something higher, which could be, protection of the home and family. That's a very noble thing. It could be to allow yourself more freedom in the future, to live a more normal life. Yeah, no one here on this planet was designed to wake up at 6, go punch a clock, get off at 6, come home, watch some TV, eat some dinner, yell at the family and go to bed. That's not what we were designed for. So it is okay to work towards getting yourself into a situation where you have to do less of that or none of it. That's okay. But greed for the sake of greed is an imbalance in that center. An imbalance in the emotional center has to do with, it has to do with connections to things. And what I mean by that is that everything out there has the potential of serving as food for you. Both the low end and the high end of the astral light can both serve as food for you, but it shouldn't. There's a certain standard that you should maintain in your emotional center that won't let it connect to the lower orders of the astral light, because really that's its job. Just like the moving center loves to move, the emotional center loves to make connections to things, and it will connect to absolutely everything if you don't control it. Think of these 5 centers as children within you, very, very ill-trained children. I've never grown up with any kind of parentage. An imbalance, or we'll call this not imbalance, but we will call this methods by which the centers lose their vitality. Just like the angular movements, just like the sudden starts and stops, just like lack of balance, not being clumsy, things like that. Each of them has their own version of that. In the sexual center, it's generally to do with, I think the right term is making shit up. Making things up. We've talked about daydreaming before, but there's also invention and fantasy and all kinds of other things that go along with it. The core aspect of the sexual center's function is to do with merging and marrying things that need to be merged and married together to produce an actual result in your life. And I've given the example before of daydreaming. What would I do if I won the lottery? Okay, this is spillage, this is leakage in your sexual center, or any number of things like that we entertain like this. The reason why is because, in this example, a person daydreaming about what would I do if I won the lottery, and then they haven't even bought a lottery ticket, it's obvious that it's fantasy, isn't it? It's obvious that it can never, ever go anywhere because it cannot find manifestation in physical reality within reason. I mean, you might be walking home and stumble and fall down and, see a piece of paper that happens to just be the winning lottery ticket, but we all know that's not going to happen. So any kind of imagination that you're currently using that cannot actually have some sort of manifested result should be worked on. There's a million other examples of this. Now, let me make a distinction here. Because do you recall the exercise of projecting yourself, right? Where you stand here and then you place yourself in some other spot and imagine that journey and then walk to that spot. Do you remember this exercise? Yeah. That really is geared towards the sexual center, because it's training it to find results in what it imagines, what it can conceive. This is not a thinking center exercise when you do that. Any questions on that one? That one can be tricky. Do imagine your own evolution, because it's highly probable if you put the work in. Now, there's another aspect to this as well. You can always approach something as a, I wonder if, and this involves the sexual center. For example, if you decide that you wish to win the lottery, it's okay to kind of play with the process of going, I wonder what would happen if I don't know, go to this hill, sit and meditate until the right numbers pop into my head, and then I jot them down and I rush over and buy a lottery ticket. Will you win? Probably not. Still, probably not. And there's a reason for that. I can debunk this whole, if you're psychic, why don't you win the lottery? I can debunk that easily. But it's okay to play with those types of things. I said before, when I was a kid, I used to lay in bed staring up at the ceiling fan and just trying to use the force, right, to make it move with just sheer will. Yeah. Don't ever stop doing things like that, because you literally don't know what you're capable of. But converse to that, on the other side of that coin, is don't imagine that you already possess certain talents that you haven't worked for and don't actually possess. Our culture is filled with that. It's a trap. That's a trap. Yeah. All right, questions? I rambled. Hopefully it was a good ramble, good run. Useful, that's what I want, useful. Questions or comments?
Yes, yeah, one comment on the daydreaming, wonder if I do this. I think I want to add that if you don't take an actual step to achieving that dream, you can dream it once, twice, 3 times, but if it's just a dream and without an actual step, or at least a concrete plan to achieve that, then that's leakage. It's
worse than leakage. It's actually introducing a toxin into your system. Any energy that you summon in things like that doesn't get used gets stored and eventually just rots inside of you. It finds no movement. So you're absolutely right. But it's worse than leakage. It's toxic.
The other aspect that me and Kimberly have been talking about a little bit of this, and I don't know if you want this. The whole, when you mentioned, hey, visualize you going there.
Uh-huh.
Visualize you taking the move. And the way I kind of see it is, to a certain extent, visualize your dream. It can be a small dream like walking across, picking up a flower, or it can be a somewhat bigger dream like, I want to learn to drive a car. Mm-hmm. That's a dream. That's a reasonable dream. Or I want to have a $10,000 portfolio, stock, whatever it is. Have that dream, put in the work to think through what is needed, and then pretty single-mindedly focus on the things that you need to get done one by one.
Absolutely.
Not saying completely blindside yourself and don't think of something that could go wrong, but don't focus on the stuff that's go wrong. Focus on what's right. Focus on what is needed to do, and focus on that, start doing one by one, and then things will fall in place. You'll get derailed, but
Yeah.
so that's like a little bit more than just, it's not for bigger things, bigger goals. It's not, you can't just extrapolate, think I'm there and your body will go there. It's not as simple as that. It takes more commitment.
No, and that is a good exercise from the standpoint of practicing success, because that's really baby steps, isn't it? You start here, you think you're going to go there, you visualize and watch the process, and then you actually do it. What you've just created in yourself is a pattern for success. It's baby steps, it's small, but then and only then can you move on to doing more difficult things, doing things with your emotions, doing things with your thoughts, and so on and so forth, your own development. Yeah, good. Who wants to answer the puzzle that gets posed to probably every psychic on their in their career of, well, if you're psychic, why haven't you won the lottery? Who wants to answer that one? Because there should be an answer, shouldn't there? It's a valid question. Someone take a stab at that.
All right, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, do it.
So by the very act of picking those numbers, you've altered the timeline.
Elaborate. You're close. So far, you're close. I think you're heading in the right direction. Altered the timeline. What timeline? Oh,
All right, actually, it's more, it's not so much the numbers, but summoning the energy of it shifts. See, it shifts the fields, and it creates branches of reality.
yeah. I'm highly psychic, and I don't play the lottery.
Mhm.
The reason why is because this has to do with roles of life. Had I never encountered a work or a way, then maybe I would go buy lottery tickets, and maybe I would actually even win. But I'm not in my role of life anymore. Do you see? When this is your role of life, you kind of, there's always going to be a Mozart, there's always going to be a drug addict, there's always going to be a doctor, there's always going to be a janitor. All of these kinds of roles of life are pre-programmed, okay? And your soul and spirit zip down into this role of life, and you live it. Just like the leaves on a tree come back year after year after year. Different leaves, same concept, same role, same function, okay? This is called recurrence, or recurrence into a role of one's life. Now, every so often, something bumps you outside of that role of life and brings you into a different non-role. What I mean by that is that there is no role, there is no planetary role for what I'm doing, for example, for what I'm trying to do and accomplish with you. This is not a predefined planetary role. I should be somewhere down here, but I'm not. I'm doing this, okay? And this, if this has the potential for winning the lottery, then it is the same role that will always win the lottery. Do you understand? One lottery winner has a life, they die. Someone recurs, or some soul and spirit recurs back into that function, and they magically win the lottery. And this happens time and time and time again, because the people who were winning the lottery have always won the lottery and will always win the lottery, because that is the role of life. Their planetary experience is meant to include something that involves winning the lottery, whether it being, oh my God, I'm so lucky, whether it being having it all and then becoming destitute, whatever the case is, yes, or going from destitution to having it all, going back to destitution. You see that almost all the time, right? that role is a teaching mechanism. There's no real planetary need for anybody to win the lottery. There's just a need to have certain experiences. The planet needs certain experiences, and God needs certain experiences. And so, zip, the lottery winner is already preordained from that standpoint. Every role of life is preordained, already known from start to finish exactly what's going to happen, except in these rare situations where all of a sudden you're not in a role of life anymore. That makes sense? Yeah. It has to do with how the nature of the mechanics of the universe itself. And I'll tell you what, having this happen to you is way more lucky than winning the lottery for you. Right?
Pierce, it seems to me like an individual spirit would be searching for a diversity of experiences. So they might repeat some experiences as long as it's unconscious, but in the evolution of one of us individuals, it seems like there would be this need for a wide diversity. So there would be, we would all sort of go through that pattern of wealth and destitution, for example, or in order to become a fully fledged being that we are.
Well, yes, but it extends beyond that. Let's talk about the soul and the spirit for a moment. I think there's generally a lot of confusion therein. Just like this body, the soul does not belong to you whatsoever. Not even a little bit of it belongs to you. This body does not belong to you. It's completely planetary. In the case of the soul, it is an admixture of the forces from all the planets in this solar system. Okay, that's what kind of coalesces, comes to be the soul that inhabits the body. The only you of you that can really be called that, or at least has the potential of being the you of you, is the spirit. Because if you can think of it this way, back in the beginning of time, whenever that was, God or the creator or whatever you want to call it, fractured itself into billions of little pieces. And what you call your spirit, what inhabits your life, is one of those little particles, one of those little fractured, broken off parts. Now, this was necessary because nothing can experience itself as a whole. Nothing can know anything about itself if it is just a singular unit. It has to separate out into billions upon billion, well, an unfathomable amount, not even billions, okay? Trillions, hundreds of trillions, whatever comes, many, many zeros after that. They have to have this interaction with one another. Yeah? If you and I, Kimberly, if you and I both worked at the same company, culturally speaking, then we would have a particular type of interaction, and the yield, the friction, the symmetry, all of this that comes out of that interaction reinforms the intelligence of God, fulfills the purpose of what happens when this bumps into this in any number of millions of peculiar different ways. So that's it. That's just God learning about itself, if you'll pardon the expression God. I think it's used rather loosely, but the soul is planetary consciousness. You've heard the expression as above, so below. We're talking about the spirit. That's the God bit. The soul is the planet and planetary bit. And it does also come from Earth too. She's one of the members of the solar system. But you can liken it to pre-programmed synapse in the brain, right? When you learn to do something, right? I'm going to take this, I'm going to throw it up, and I'm going to catch it. Okay, and I can do this probably any number of times because there is a pathway in my brain for being able to do so. As a baby, that didn't exist. The baby had to learn that. But now, as an adult, it can do this. And throwing an eraser up and down in the air is one thing, but having the same thoughts, responding the same way to the same stimulus over and over and over again, that's that synaptic action of the planet. Okay, and so you have these what we call lives, because we're on a very lower scale from this standpoint. These various lives, or these various roles of life, are nothing more than repetitive thoughts of the planet. That's all they are. This role you wake up in. And it's largely due to the soul. The planet floods, or the planets flood the planetary body with the equivalent of the flooding of the chemical that's in between the synapse, and it fires a certain way, time and time and time and time and time again. Okay, every now and then, certain brain functions of the planet, in other words, certain lives, are no longer useful, and those get pushed aside for different roles, but it's the same thing. Where does that leave you, Kimberly? Not too heavy?
I think I need to process it a bit more. But I think that makes sense. It's I see you as responding with more of a collective approach to the evolution, the planetary evolution versus the individual evolution.
Yeah. There's only one thing that's trying to evolve or trying to become more conscious, and that is the original source, or manifestations of that. And literally, you know, the enlightened sages, the enlightened gurus, I hold the same value that they do, from the standpoint of there's no difference between you and I, for example, other than where we sit in relation to each other. That's it. That's the difference. But because of that difference, it creates an energy between us. Everyone that you interact with creates a certain energy that is useful for the evolution of God and creation. I feel honored to be a part of that, actually. And you know, I mean, there's certain cells in the organism that get replaced constantly and certain ones that don't. Isn't that right? Think of the cells in your hand. You know, every 7 years, it's you literally have a completely different body. Roughly takes about 7 years for every single cell in this organism to be replaced. Some of them many times, except for certain ones in the brain, certain ones in the stomach, and in ladies, the ovum. Right? You start off with all those, and that's what you have for the rest of your life. So this brings into context the idea of immortality. There are certain cells that are immortal compared to others. And when we discuss a personal development journey, unlike in the human body where one cell doesn't become another, right? A cell for my finger doesn't become a brain cell. In the realms of conscious evolution and personal development, you can. You can take a standard issue life and turn it into an immortal one. And this is what immortality is always driving towards. Good stuff. Excellent. Okay. I'm feeling the need to wrap up soon. Does anyone have another comment, something that they want to throw in, or even a final question?
I've got a question. You know, you said that every 7 years you replace every single cell.
Yeah.
So why is it that, say you've got some sort of medical problem, why is it that you can't replace it and heal yourself?
Well,
why does it replace itself in a damaged way?
Yeah, because everything starts off as an electromagnetic template that the particles form around, right? And so if the template unless I should put it this way, because there are extraordinary healing capabilities wound up within this type of work or other way work that can change the electromagnetic template and cause some pretty miraculous healings, actually. But they just kind of fill in, right? The cells, the molecules, they fill into this electromagnetic template. And so that's the source of it. And that, generally speaking, that template is with a person for their entire life. It doesn't get replaced every 7 years. It's that is the right way to put it. It is an electromagnetic field that holds everything together. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it is also not impossible to alter it, but it doesn't get replaced ever. But you can smooth things out. You can push things around. Most of you know that I grew up doing Kung Fu, and I was privileged to study under someone who was absolutely masterful in it. And he could literally do this. There's no, you set someone up, right? As a young student, I would be expected like charge at him, right? Try to do an attack. And he could literally just do a movement with his hands without touching me, that could shift all the contents in my aura over to one side and cause me to lose balance. And so I couldn't actually directly approach because I couldn't maintain my own balance. This is what Chinese medicine is based on. This is what Ayurvedic healing is based on. This is what, pranayama and all of these other types of disciplines are all geared towards working with the electromagnetic template of the human complex. Is this a stupid thing? Yeah, it's back to following me, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway. Does that help?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, this is the focus of this short course, if you will, this 10 weeks, give or take now, because we do need to take some pauses and breaks here and there. But it is working with and directly manipulating the electromagnetic template that doesn't just guide the formation of our bodies, but also informs the intelligence of what we're capable of doing. Things like clairvoyance, thought transference, all of this type of stuff is so possible. Would you mind? I tell you what, in closing, I want to read you the quote unquote author's preface of something that I'm working on. Okay, that's going to be more of like a guide for this initial type of study. Would it be okay if I read that to you, what I have so far? Okay, might give you a better idea as far as where we're going. And now it's convenient that the camera's following me, isn't it? All right. So the work that I'm working on, which could either be a very short work or turn into an actual book, is entitled The New Science of Magnetic Vitality. I'm going to read the author's preface. Within the pages of this work, you will find a wealth of new knowledge and practical exercises that are designed to assist in the rapid restoration and enhancement of a particular substance found in all living beings known as magnetic vitality. Magnetic vitality is the rarefied substance of life itself. It is the ephemeral force that animates and invigorates all living things, from the smallest single-cell organism to the pando-quaking aspen grove, and even inhabits you. Throughout the ages, it has been known by many names, such as anima, ruh, pneuma, prana, chi, mana, or kenda, od, and ruach. Whatever the name, the ancients knew that the cultivation of magnetic vitality was the key to personal and spiritual evolution. This work marks the rediscovery of the ancient knowledge of magnetic vitality. It outlines an entirely new way of cultivation that anyone can practice at any time without the need for special accommodations or retreat from one's daily life. In this aspect, this work is a valuable contribution to humanity in that it offers a modern and practical approach to personal development. A warning. There are 3 types of people who will read this work. The first type is curious, who has studied many similar works with great enthusiasm, only to find the fire of their interest quickly exhausted and eventually die out. The primary reason for this lies not in the subject matter, but the psychology of the student. They are only curious to know things without making the necessary efforts to practice what they learn. The second type is incredulous, who loves to argue, criticize, and debunk anything different from their already set beliefs. These people derive joy from the idea that they are highly knowledgeable in all things and possess the deep-seated desire to convert everyone to their way of thinking. Their chief attribute is arrogance. The third type is rational, who can weigh evidence in any matter and update their beliefs if necessary, without feeling a sense of loss by doing so. They are neither believers nor non-believers, but genuine seekers with a love of knowledge and the resolve to put knowledge to practical use. They are not gullible, but instead possess a willingness to try new things and base their opinions on their results. It is only this type who will succeed in this current endeavor. Dedication. It is the author's greatest desire that this work may be used for the betterment of humankind. On the mundane level, these practices herein promote more excellent health, longevity, greater focus, concentration, well-being, and joy. On the esoteric level, the development of one's higher faculties, the transference of thought from one person to another, the ability to heal all manner of disease and illness, as well as the knowledge of interacting with the so-called astral and spiritual domains directly, are all within its purview. And that's what I have so far for that. How are we, friends and family? We good? Yeah. Okay. Are you excited? Looking forward to this? Yeah, it's wonderful. Sis, I don't think it's shown up on this planet, not in this way before. Yeah, things like Qigong and Prana and the Odic force and any number of things that have shown up on the planet, most of which have run their course because of the world in which we live. And we talked about this with the electromagnetics that we swim in these days. Makes it difficult. Yeah? So this is a new work, a new approach to something that's old, but I think it's more workable now.
The words coalescence and or update I used earlier, I believe, and coalescence.
Yeah, yeah. Very good. All right, well, stay tuned, everyone. And it looks like this video recorded, so I think this will be a useful one in the future. Be well for the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Bye now.